understand you were only 4 years old when your family relocated from a small town in Victoria to the Hampton-based Society of St. Pius X cult. Had either of your parents been in or associated with a cult previously?
Well, firstly, we didn't actually relocate from our property. We lived, all of our family lived on a small property just outside of Ballarat. And we travelled from that property, so it was like 2 hours drive one way to attend church at Hampton. And that particular group is a sect. It is a sect that is a breakaway from the Catholic Church. So there's a difference between a sect and a cult. So a sect is usually a breakaway from a church. A cult it can be a mix of a takeaway, like a breakaway from a church or a Christian group, but generally speaking, mostly it's just a mishmash of a few things that a person has brought together and created in this group.
Okay, so was it in any way approved by the Catholic Church or not?
Initially, the Catholic Church said yes, but they were actually, like with the Society of St. Pius X, they were actually excommunicated in 1988 from the Catholic Church. And before that, back in the late 70s, they were like they had a slap over the wrist. I can't think of the right words right now, but they had it like a slap over the wrist because they were kind of going off a little bit too far from, mainstream. So they were already being, like sanctioned to a point. But then 1988 was when the straw broke the camel's back and they were excommunicated.
Right. Okay, so reprimand followed by an excommunication.
Yeah, yes.
So had either of your parents been in or associated with anything other than Catholicism previously?
No, they hadn't. My mother was actually a nun before she got married. So,
really? Wow.
Yeah, she was. So she had been training to be a nursing sister over at Subiaco in Western Australia with the St. John of God nuns. And back when she first joined them, they were quite traditional. And so what we, in having done some study around this, and the reasons why people join these strict sects or cults is generally they're what you call a seeker. So my mother wasn't happy with the way the church had changed, like the way it had modernised, the way it had updated, and she actually really liked the way it was before. She liked all the pomp and circumstance, the bells and smells, all the rituals, the prayers. She loved all of that. And so when it was stripped back, she wasn't completely happy with that. So when I was 4, she met a priest who also didn't like the changes in the Catholic Church, and he preferred to be old-fashioned. And so they met, and Mum just went for it. She just absolutely loved the fact that he said the old Mass in Latin, and he used to come to our lounge room initially and say Mass there, and then there was more and more people coming, and it became too much. And so that's when they moved into a couple of, they had a couple of different places in Melbourne that they moved from. So they moved around Melbourne a little bit, and then they actually bought that church in Hampton in 1979, 1980, and it's still there today.
Oh, wow. It's funny. I also used to like the Latin Mass, but because it was shorter, like 30 minutes and then you're out, whereas the English one was an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So for 2 very different reasons.
Yes, that's right. But then again, it depended on how fast the priest said the Latin. I've been to low Mass, because you're talking about a low Mass. A low Mass should take about 30 minutes, but I've been to a low Mass before, and they've taken longer than that. So it depends on how fast they say the Latin.
Well, I must have been really lucky, because it was 30 minutes and I was out. So
okay, well, I'll say you were lucky then.
So are your parents still alive, and do you have a relationship with your mum, I suppose, predominantly? Was your dad around?
My dad was around. The reason why I mentioned my mum the most is because she was the one that was the dominator and the manipulator, and she was the one that wanted to go back to this. Like, so many times I heard Dad as a child, I would be hearing Dad going, oh, why do we have to travel so far to go to bloody mass like that? Why can't we just go to the local parish? Mm-hmm. And he was quite happy to just go along with the local parish. And like you, he liked the shortened form of everything, shortened form of every prayer. Bang, bang, bang. As long as we've got it done. Okay, we've said morning prayers, we've said night prayers, we've been to church on Sundays, we're done.
Yep.
He was happy for that, but Mum wasn't. She wanted everything. As I mentioned before, she loved the pomp and circumstance, the bells and smells, the rituals, the prayers, everything. She liked everything elongated. She liked the old-fashioned ways. And so she was the one that was the prime mover for all of this. And so my parents were just Catholic before, and then, Mum went this way, and it was against Dad's will. He didn't like it. Do I still have a relationship with them? Well, I choose not to have a relationship with my mother because she does not see that anything that she's done is, wasn't the right thing. Myself and my siblings we were homeschooled in isolation. We had no friends outside of the church group, and even them we would only see on Sundays for a short period of time. And then Mum would give us 20 questions afterwards to find out exactly what we talked about with them. Did they say or do or mention anything that could be against anything that she was teaching us? And we weren't allowed to use the phone, so we never phoned them. If we did write letters, Mum would read incoming and outgoing mail to make sure. There was only classical music on the radio that we were allowed to listen to. We learned classical music on the piano. So we had no magazines. Dad was pushing just to get the local country paper once a week for him to read, for God's sake. And that was only about, the sheep and cattle sales and the price that wool was bringing, and, talking about the drought or floods or, it was all farm stuff. There was nothing else there. And, Dad was pushing just to get that for his little bit of enjoyment for reading the paper once a week.
No, so I can't imagine. I just can't imagine that. Yeah.
Well, see, that's why. My main reason for speaking out is because even though people, when they hear my story, they think, "Oh my God, this is so far backwards." How could it have even happened, even in the 70s and 80s? Up until even 10 years ago. But what they don't know is, and I noticed that you asked the question further along, but I will answer it now, is that yes, the Society of St. Pius X is still alive and well today. In fact, it's growing, and it has grown all around the world. And the thing is that while people might be a bit aghast at how I was brought up, it's still happening. It is still happening today with groups of the Society of St. Pius X. For instance, here in Australia, they've got a massive property down in Tynong in country Victoria. They have got a huge church there. They built this massive shed, and they put a church-like facade on the outside of it. It's completely like a church on the inside, and it would have to hold at least 1,000 people, and they've got their own church there. Now, all of those families there, the smallest family would have 7 or 8 kids. The smallest family. Now, all of those kids that go to that school there, they are pretty much, while they might have a few modernisms here and there, they keep a very tight control on that, so that those kids do not know too much about sex, do not know too much about technology, that they do not venture outside of the parameters and the boundaries that they've set up. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of guilt, judgment. So while people might be aghast. Pardon?
I said the guilt comes hand in hand with Catholicism, doesn't it?
It does. Well, as my editor so perfectly puts it, Mary Gebhardt, she says the Catholic guilt is the gift that keeps on giving even when you don't want it to.
Oh, yeah. I can attest to that. I mean, even now, like I turned 50 last year, and last time I walked out of the Catholic Church when I was 19, never going back. And I still now catch myself, with the same, these words in my head.
The loop, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they did such a good job. I think it's the catechism. I think it was
bloody catechism. My
that.
God. My God. I know all of them. I know all of them.
We had to learn those off by heart. We had to do that by rote. And, you know, I've been a trainer in a past working life, and I understand now how repeating things several times, you know, implants or embeds them into your psyche. And that's what catechism did, you know, and I hated catechism. It was like,
yeah. Look, even now, you know, like, you'd be surprised. I think somebody said to me, oh, they wanted to do something with me on March 19. Do you know what popped into my head? Feast of St. Joseph.
Yeah. It's my birthday.
Oh, right, okay. But you know what I mean?
I know that one
Feast of St. Joseph, first thing that pops into my head.
You know, I didn't actually have a birthday on my birthday for quite a few years because
it was Lent.
I couldn't have my birthday being greater than a celebration. Yeah. No. So yeah, I'm well aware. Do you know what I do now? I celebrate it on Paddy's Day because
you?
It's fantastic. It feels like everyone is enjoying my birthday on the 17th.
They are. Yeah, they're out for a big piss up.
Yeah.
Why not?
So that's how I kind of got around it. But no, I know exactly what you're saying. So,
but it's interesting. It's interesting that you saying that, because for me personally, I have completely broken that loop. And I've completely, like, yes, I do have, you know, like March 19 as St. Joseph, March 25th is, you know, the Annunciation, and whether or not we actually practice it and celebrate it is another thing because it's Lent and all the rest of it. So I've got all that. I know all that. However, I've broken all those guilt loops. And that's one of my biggest things now when I mentor women, is that I can help them move past that. Because I, you know, like, don't get me wrong, I've done the whole guilt loop thing. I've done it. And I've, you know, and even, you know, like for years, even when I didn't go to Mass, I wouldn't eat meat on Good Friday. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And then I knew that I was okay. I knew I was on the home run when a couple of years ago, I actually ate meat on Good Friday. It was by accident. I didn't actually think about it. I just went and there was some meat in the fridge and I was hungry and I ate. And then afterwards I went, oh, it's Good Friday. Oh, well, never mind. And I was good.
I actually turned that whole thing into a nutrition thing. I've just myself, because I've never really been a big fish eater, but what I used to say to myself was, well, it's not that I'm having it because I'm Catholic on a Friday. It's because I never have fish. And this way I get those minerals into my body if I do force myself to have it on a Friday. And, but no, I don't think I don't scold myself, but I just thought it was interesting. As I said, only last year I had a voice come to me. I think it was when I was about to scold my kid for something. I've got two daughters, and I was about to just reprimand my daughter for something. And then I thought, oh, why would I say that? That's coming from doctrine. That's dogma I was about to spew at my daughter. And I was thinking, no, you're more modern than that. Don't do that. Put that away, you know. But I was amazed how crisply and clearly it came through. And I was 50 years old. And it was like, what the, you know? Mm-hmm. So I know exactly what you're saying. So, so do you have a relationship with your dad?
Look, I have a bit of a relationship with my dad, but they're both in their 70, well, Dad will be 80 this year. The thing is that they're so indoctrinated, they're so, they're of an age now where they'll just never change. And it's just not, see, for me, I'm very different. I am the only one in the family. So I'm eldest of 9. When my mum changed when I was 4, I clearly remember that day, and I remember what life was like before that. And none of my other siblings were either too young or not even born yet, so they have absolutely no idea of what Mum and Dad and what life was like before that happened. And so I am the only one that is actually psychologically aware, or I think I am empathetic, compassionate towards people's pasts. I can fully understand mum and dad's pasts. However, that does not excuse the fact that, dad has apologised, for lots of things that weren't his fault. But, mum will not apologise. She staunchly stands in Catholicism. She's told me I am going to hell because I'm such a bad example and I'm taking all of my kids with me. I just said, great, fabulous, let's have a party. Yeah, there you
go. The reason I left the church at 19 was, did I tell you before that when I was 14, I got up in the middle of the school mass and basically declared my atheism and left the church. I know. I don't know where that kid came from. She comes out occasionally every few years, and but my punishment was I had to give the next 3 religious classes on the Holy Trinity. So they made me actually. Oh, I know. Can you believe that? And but the good thing was, after I'd done the 3 classes with the class and done all the research, I knew what I wanted to do. So I wanted to train and teach and stuff like that. So and communicate. So it actually put me on the path to what I do now with the magazine. And so I think sometimes in your deepest despairs you find that spark of inspiration.
You do. Well, see, now besides mentoring, I love study, and I've become a real lover of study. And strangely enough, or maybe not so strangely, I am going to be delving more into religious studies because having been brought up so strictly in it, I understand it. And then having not practiced it, I can also look at it. So I can look at it from the inside and I can look at it from the outside. And so for me, that fascinates me. So I'm going to be doing more in the way of philosophy, theology, religion, and that makes me hungry to learn even more.
So tell me, what was the priest like who ran that? Can I call it the Hampton community, or shall we just?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, no, you can call it the Hampton community. Well, the thing is that the priest. The thing is that there's been a number of priests there, so it's not just one priest. They're rotated every so often because they believe. I think they rotate them every couple of years. I think because they say that the priest becomes too easy in his comfort zone and gets to know the parishioners and their sins, and to keep up a level of freshness and sort of keep the parishioners on their toes, they should have changes every so often. So there were a number of changes there of priests. So initially it was the priest that my mum had first met, Father Cummins, and he wasn't of the society. He actually came from the Redemptorists, so he was a Redemptorist priest. And then when the society first ordained, there was the first priest that came there, he was actually a New Zealander. So he came and he was there for a year or so, and then there have been changes ever since. So it's not just one priest, but they do that in all the parishes. All the parishes get overhauled every couple of years. They get fresh blood in.
It's interesting. Straight away, my cynical mind went to, is that because to avoid charges as well? Because
interesting that you say that, because there was a priest, actually 2 priests that are pedophiles, and one of them is not with the society anymore. One is, but there have been a number of them that have done that and have been moved on. Yes, so. That particular group, the Society of St. Pius X, have not taken responsibility for actions which have happened.
Is the Society of St. Pius X still around?
It's all around the world, and their main base is in Icone in Switzerland. They have a big seminary. That's the original seminary, and they have a big seminary there, and that's where they do a lot of their ordinations. They do have a seminary here in Goulburn in Australia. It's not big. It doesn't have very many priests come out of it. They have another one or two in America, I think, but the main one is in Icone in Switzerland. They are flourishing. Their mission statement is to, well, loosely, it's not word for word, but their mission statement is basically to uphold tradition. So the reason why it's called St. Pius X is because St. Pius X, Pope Pius X, when he was back in the, I think he was from 1910 to 1916, 17. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on those dates. That's when he was Pope. He issued an encyclical, and I don't remember the name of it. I should, but I don't. But it was against modernism. And so for the Society of St. Pius X, they are against modernism, and they just uphold everything from that time. So it's even before 1962. It's not just the fact that they don't accept the changes from 1962. They don't accept a lot of changes from before. So they're really just going back to, basically 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 100 and something years ago. That's what they're going back to. And that's what they're upholding. They're not actually so they're being a real stick in the mud and not advancing at all. So that is their mission statement, and they have flourished all around the world. And if anybody was to look them up, it might look like a very cohesive group online, but there are a lot of broken factions within the actual group.
And what a perfect name for the Pope, Pius.
Yeah, well, there was a string of them. He was number 10, and then there was Pius XI, and then there was Pope Pius XII, who was from 1930. He was in the 1930s through to the 1940s. So yes. So
were they were? I know when a pope is elected, or they choose the name that they want to be known by.
They do.
Are they usually? This is something I never really thought about till now. Are they usually chosen on the type of personality of the person, or
the Pope being elected chooses his own name, and generally the values of the one being elected aligns a lot with a previous Pope of that name. So
that makes you
might. Actually, see, you have like Leo the 13th, which was he was the end of the late 1800s, early 1900s. I think he was before Leo the 13th was before Pius the 10th. I think I could be wrong. No, Pius the 9th. Sorry, there was Leo the 13th, then Pius the 9th, and then Pius the 10th. So Leo, there hasn't been another Leo. So obviously, whenever that particular Pope. Pope Leo the 13th obviously aligned greatly with other, Leo the 12th or maybe Leo the 11th, I don't know. But generally you find that their values, lead on to the name.
The current one is kind of doing a lot of things against the masses, isn't it, at the moment? A lot of the decisions he's making.
Well, again, I haven't kept up with that on purpose, but going back into religious studies, I do need to update myself on that. That is one of the reasons why, yet another reason why the society are being real sticklers and will not accept any olive branch coming from the Vatican, because they want to have everything on their terms, and they will absolutely not budge to being able to accept anything from the new changes from 1962 onwards.
Yes. To be honest, even I'm a little shocked, and I'm not Catholic anymore. Tell us a little bit about the brainwashing you received as a child inside the cult, and maybe even prior with your mum, because it sounds like she did a bit of a job on you too up until 4.
Yeah. Well, firstly, having done some study around this, that it's not termed brainwashing anymore. That is a term that has been not used especially in UK and the Europe for the past 20 years. So we don't use that because it's more because brainwashing, the meaning of that word is more like that one can take over another. So basically I could take over your body and your brain and have you act exactly the way I want you to, which is not the case when it comes to being in a sect and in a cult and even joining one, because those that join sects or cults usually make the choice to do so. Either they make the choice to do so, or in my case, I was forced to go along with it. But either way, you've still got some sort of choice. Now, when it comes to, it's more indoctrination. Yeah. So for me personally, Mum had us sitting in front of her for at least an hour every morning. Like, we had to learn the catechism by rote, as you mentioned before. We had to learn all that first by rote, and then we had to answer, Mum could, she would pick a question out and we'd have to answer it word for word. If we didn't, it was back to learning it again until we did. But then she would have us sitting in front of her and she would literally go through, like, for instance, all, like the commandments one by one, not all on the same day, but it'd be like the first commandment. Then she would, we all had to know the 10 commandments off by heart. But with the first, she'd start with the first one. Okay, the first one, what is the first commandment? And then we'd all have to chant that. Then she would go through each and every sin that could be committed against the first commandment. So it was almost like you had a list of sins and a list of sub-sins and sub-sub-sins, and they could all lead off onto basically a massive big branch. So basically everything you did was a sin. Mm-hmm. So it was because she had so much control over us, because obviously we were homeschooled, so we were at home. We didn't interact with anybody else. So she was watching us basically 24 hours a day. So everything was, like, even if she told us to get up and go and wash the dishes, if we delayed even by a few seconds, that's a sin of disobedience. You've got a venial sin of disobedience on your soul for that. And it was anything, like, even if it was like, oh, can you please go and do something? And it'd be like, why? Well, that's answering back. It's a sin, a venial sin of answering back. It's a sin against whatever commandment. I can't even go through it. But you know what I mean? Everything was, it was all based down to guilt, judgment, punishment. That's what it was all about. And so it was complete indoctrination, and this is not just in my family, but you've got to also think that it was in the family, but then you've also got it from the pulpit on Sundays and holy days when we went to church, because you've got the priest reinforcing that as well. So you've not just got it in your little, in a micro way, you've got it in a bigger way as well with the, out in the group. And that goes for both the sect, so both the Society of St. Pius X and then later the cult. And we just had in both the sect and the cult, so both as a child and then later on when I did join the cult with my husband, ex-husband I should say, it's the indoctrination. And see, a lot of that is easily done because of the isolation and then the guilt, then the punishment, the fear of chastisements, or in Mum's case, the fear of hell. It is, and you squash your own character and personality to be able to follow that, because ultimately you should want to go to heaven. And I mean, the more venial sins and especially mortal sins that you commit, well, then the longer the purgatory, and you're never going to get to heaven. So it's all, every day it's just the long slog of, I have to jump up the instant Mum says go and do something. I'm not allowed to ask why. I have to just literally do as I'm told the whole way. And this also carried over into the cult, because the cult leader, for instance, the world was supposed to end in the first week of June 1997. And like, we had arrived there in February 1997, and we were just told that, we had to do these things. We had to say that we had to attend prayers 3 times a day. We had to attend mass once a day. We had to be offering every single movement as a sacrifice. So just picking up my water bottle and having a drink, I've got to mentally say, Jesus, I offer this to you to take away my, to cut down my purgatory. I'm picking up a pencil. I'm picking out the clothes. Everything had to be a sacrifice in order to cut down my purgatory. And it's stressful. It's so stressful because I can't even enjoy time, because that's a waste of time, because you should always be thinking of God first, of heaven, of how many sacrifices you can make. Instead of sitting down and doing some embroidery or reading a book, no, you should be saying more prayers. And so it was all, and then when it comes to, because people ask me, the brainwashing and the cult, again, I say it's not brainwashing, as I explained before. You do still have choices, but those choices are not choices that you would make if you were free. So the leader of a restrictive group, or a new religious movement, as we also call them, they create and manipulate circumstances so it forces you to go the way they want.
Yes.
So they create, and then they manipulate, and then they force. So if you and I were living freely, we wouldn't make any of those choices. But because everything has been created and manipulated to a certain point, you're like pushed down a funnel, and you're making the best choice you can in those circumstances. Yes. And so it looks like you're actually doing as you're told, but the reality is you're just going along with it, because arcing up is really not a choice.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. You obviously perceived your marriage to your tutor at 18, and I should state here that he was 31 at the same time, and as an escape from not only the sect, but also I think from your own family. The time in between the sect and the cult that you went to later, was this spent in the real world, or were you still in a kind of communal living?
No, we weren't in communal living. Well, firstly, you have to remember that I had no girlfriends. I had nothing to compare, and I had no life knowledge, no life experience to even know what love was, to know what romance was. And then I only found out last year that he groomed me, because I found out through someone else, a girl who is 2 years older than me, and he had wanted to marry her when she was 17, so therefore I was 15, and it was within the year, like her parents sent him packing, and it was within that year that my mother invited him to live at my parents' house. So I was actually groomed. I was chosen and groomed by him, but I had no knowledge of that, because how could I know that? No. I had nothing with which to be able to have that knowledge. And so I became codependent. So he groomed me to be codependent. Obviously, I had no idea what codependence was. And I thought it was love, but I had nothing to even gauge it by. So, yes, in a certain way, it was to escape my family. But then I can articulate and verbalize and understand all of this now. I couldn't back then. So I'm only now articulating, verbalizing, and understanding fully what my actions were back then, because I literally had no idea. So I thought that I was doing a grown-up thing, and having been taught that my only choices, I actually wanted to be a nurse, because my gifts are, empathy, compassion, understanding people. I wanted to help people get better, and I wanted to be a nurse. I thought that being a nurse was the way to go. It wasn't until I was in my early 40s that I realised that this is actually through coaching, through mentoring, through teaching, and that is my gift. And I was told, so obviously my choices were to get married and have children, go to be a nun. And I really couldn't be a nurse, even if I wanted to be, because at that time they were changing all of the learning, because they used to do it in hospitals and then they moved it into universities. That's right. Well, true Catholics don't go to university. There's too much new thought going on there. The devil has got his hook into the universities, and that's why these hordes of young people are having sex before marriage, and they're throwing out the Catholic values. No, can't be going to university. And so I was afraid, because I was afraid to mix and mingle with people because even though I wanted to, I had no idea how to. I felt like a fish out of water. I was dressing differently. I was 38 years old before I wore my first pair of jeans, my first bikini, or even pierced my ears. Because that was pride. That was pride, and it was also so I was sinning against like the 6th and the 9th commandment, because it was pride and it was also immodesty, and I was leading men to sin.
It's funny. I was also told the bikini thing, and I've never worn a bikini my entire life.
No, well, I don't look the best. I don't think that I look the best in a bikini, but hell, I am going to wear one, and I do.
Oh yeah, it wasn't a vain thing. It was the fact that I remember being told only like loose women wear bikinis.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to be loose.
There you go. So, God, how that was some indoctrination.
I know.
Look, your first husband appeared to be a believer in the various doomsday theories that circulated in the 1980s. Was he also a child of a previous cult? And if not, why do you think he would subject the people he loved to such scarcity and barbarity? And if that's my opinion.
Your opinion? Yeah, well, go for it. Look, I gave my book to a friend of mine who was a psychologist, and she said, "Oh, I read it," and she said, "I'm just going, stop it, you bastard! Stop it, you bastard!" That's not it all the way through. So the thing is that his parents came from Slovenia. They met and married out here. So he was born here, but when he went to school when he was 5, he couldn't speak any English, so it was very insulated for him too. But he also had this romantic notion, and that is another thing. So he was not only a seeker like my mum, but he was also had this romantic notion in his head that we're all meant to live, Catholics are meant to live in communities like they used to in Europe, where you have your little village and you have the church as the centerpiece of the village, and then they celebrate harvest and they help each other, and everything revolves around the church and helping each other and getting married and having lots of babies, basically. Mm-hmm. And so he had this romantic idea that, and said, well, see, it fitted nicely into his beliefs into the end of the world theories as well, because then we could all live together and live together. So we would think the same, dress the same, eat the same, have the same beliefs, and all work towards the same end. So we all be same, just the same, which was not me at all. Mm-hmm. But for him, and the added thing was that the leader of the cult group, because he was supposedly receiving visions from the Virgin Mary, he had the answers the Virgin Mary was apparently giving him the answers to the end of the world. So all of us were going to be saved because we were living on the property. We were enclosed by barbed wire fences and padlock gates, and as long as we did all the right things, we were going to be saved. All you poor people outside, you were going to die, and you weren't going to be saved. So
why am I always
the special one?
I hate it. I'm always in that group. I'm always the one being sacrificed or left behind, or the remainder. Honestly, I'm sick of it. I want to be special.
Well, if you just practice your religion, Sharon, well, then you would be special. But you just won't do as you're told. What can I say?
I do find there seems to be all of these kind of. I mean, it's not just religious groups. It happens in like social groups I've been in over the last years. There's always some person who's super zealoty about something or about a rule, and they always seem to ruin it for everybody else, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're the party poopers. Yeah.
But the only thing that's different, I think, is the religious zealots seem to is that the right word I'm using? I think it is.
Well, I would say so, yes.
Yeah. I think they're just seen as a little bit more dangerous because the indoctrination is part of it, whereas
that's it. But see, yeah, you the indoctrination is part of it, but also the judginess, and like the judging, and then you're not as good as I am, or you're not as good as you should be, and you should be following this. And see, again, I saw that with my mother, because I remember like a girl that I've been best friends with now for like, I don't know, 40 years. She, her mother could only have Mary and Jared, her brother, because she had a miscarriage in between Mary and Jared, and then she got bipolar. It runs in the family, but that stress caused the bipolar to come out. And I remember my mum was pregnant with my youngest sister, Rosie, the last one. And I remember, I can still see her now sitting at the end of the table, and then Christine was at the other end, and she goes, and she's just sitting there and she's just going, Christine, why have you only had 2 children? You know that what the Catholic teaching is. You know that you're supposed to keep having children until you can't have any more, because we're populating heaven. We're creating souls for heaven, for God. You need to be having more children. And even those couples that would get married, you know, they'd come back from their honeymoon and she'd be going, are you pregnant yet? Are you pregnant? Are you expecting? Because if you're not, well, you know, there's a problem. What's the problem?
Wow. Yeah, I know. It's certainly, that judgment. I remember that. It's all coming back to me now.
Sorry, I don't need to remind. Sorry.
I'm actually getting the waves now. So the waves will, yes, from going through. I was obviously at Catholic school. I was one near you, Corpus Christi, it used to be called.
All right. Yes. Yeah. It's still
they've changed it now, which I can't believe they did that.
Well, it is called Corpus Christi College.
Well, that's what it used to be called, but no, they've actually completely renamed it. It's Mount St. Joseph's or something now. They've
not Mont Maria.
No, Mount St. They've actually renamed it. I can't believe they did that. So, but anyway, I suppose it sounded too Catholic, maybe. I don't know.
Probably, yes, probably, yeah.
But no, we actually had nice nuns. I didn't mind our nuns. Never saw the priests really, except for they didn't do. I actually came away with the impression that priests didn't do a lot, and the nuns did everything. So I don't know. Probably I don't know if that's your impression as well.
Well, I didn't go. Well, obviously, I didn't go to Catholic school, but I didn't have much to do with nuns, because the traditional nuns, didn't come out. They because we were in Melbourne, the traditional nuns, the St. Pius X nuns, didn't come out until I think it was the mid-80s. Was it the mid-80s they came out? But they settled in Sydney, though. They didn't come to Melbourne.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you missed out.
I don't think I did.
You did not. I was also I was born in England, so I went through the Catholic system. I did catechism in England, and then I went to Catholic churches, Catholic schools over there too. And the ones in England used to hit you with rulers. At least the Australian nuns didn't do that. That was one of the perks of coming to Australia. You didn't get whacked over the knuckles with a ruler by a nun. Let's move on to the Order of Saint Charbel. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, the Order of Saint Charbel, yes, which is it was known as one of Australia's largest doomsday cults.
So it was actually a moniker attached to it, did it? The Doomsday Cult.
Because the leader, I'll actually type his name into the chat box, because
we can't say his.
Oh yeah, we can say it. His name is
Little Pebble.
Little Pebble, but otherwise known as William Cam. And people, because he was the leader of the group, and he created the Order of Saint Charbel because his idea was to bring East and West together. So in the Catholic Church, you have the Eastern Rite, so you have, Greek Orthodox, Marianites, and they have married priests but not married bishops. Now, the Little Pebble, also known as William Cam, decided that, well, he said that the Virgin Mary told him that he was supposed to unite both sides of the Catholic Church, the East and the West, by having making Saint Charbel, who is a Marianite saint, creating a new order of religious. So you would have priests, brothers and nuns and married people and single people all living together as one group, and then you would all be wearing a habit. So you'd be all wearing a habit like they used to wear back in the 1960s, basically, when they modernised them a bit and they had the veils coming from back here. So that was for everyone. So male, female, whether you were married, single or religious, that's what you had to wear. And so that's what he was trying to bring in. Now, he ended up, towards the end of us staying there, my ex-husband decided that he would become a subdeacon. He wanted to become a married priest and he was moving up the ladder to do so, but that was against my will. We were always told that any man going ahead to being a married priest or bishop, and being a married bishop was against the Catholic Church anyway, they had to have the permission of their wife, and so Tony, my ex-husband, he decided to just go ahead with it anyway without my permission. So I kicked up a shindy about it. In the end, I was guilted into allowing him to do that. But then after that happened, that's when I realised that my marriage was over. So this was 2004. And I realised that my marriage was over, and I started challenging Cam on the rules of the Catholic Church. So I wrote him 3 letters, and it was only to do with, I knew the answers already, because Tony had been collecting like Catholic books and canon law, moral and pastoral theology, the rules of, like the catechism, the rules of the Catholic, like all of that. He'd collected all of those over the years. So it was easy for me to find. It's easy, like you go and you just find out the canon law in regards to, and the whatever. And it was clearly stated in both the old canon law and the new canon law that there are no married priests and bishops in the Western Rite, which is what we are here. And so I challenged him on that, and I brought it up. I showed him, according to canon law, whatever number, according to the catechism here and here. So it was only 3 questions, and he didn't like it. And so we ended up being evicted from there. So it took basically 18 months from the time I first challenged him to us being evicted. So, but like my kids and I were very happy to be evicted. We wanted to be, when we got told that by the local sheriff that we were being evicted. The local sheriff had nothing to do with the group at all. So we got evicted by him, and my kids and I were just ecstatic to be evicted. So
the local law enforcement, they didn't keep an eye on the cult?
Yeah, to a point. But, I mean, you've got to remember that this is regarded as a religious sect, or, a new religious movement, if you want to put it that way. So law enforcement don't have any jurisdiction over that. He was arrested in August 2002. It was the 5th of August 2002. William Cam was arrested for pedophilia and charged, and he did spend 7 years in jail. And I'm surprised he actually got out, to be honest, or survived it, I should say. But the thing was that, it was interesting actually speaking to a lecturer from Charles Sturt University who contacted me to have a chat. He has done major research into new religious movements, sects and cults, and like all around the world, but especially here in Australia, and especially the Society of St. Pius X and William Cam. And it was interesting hearing his perspective, because when the police came on August the 5th to do a raid, they were under the impression that there were guns hidden on the property, but there were not guns hidden on the property. They were actually afraid that it was going to be another Jonestown, but that was never going to happen. That was never, because I mean, I was living there at the time, and I can tell you right now, the only 2 guns that were there on that day were guns that belonged to my husband, my ex-husband, and he was only allowed to use them by law for, he had them locked up in a shed away from our house. So they were not in our house where we were living. And he was only allowed to use them for like foxes or rabbits, like especially the foxes that were taking the chickens, so and the lambs. Like he was not allowed to use it for anything else. Yeah. So it was ironic, though, that on that day that Cam was arrested, is that Tony went across to the office at William Cam's request, because William Cam was thinking about, well, considering buying a handgun, and because my ex-husband was handy with carpentry and iron, steel work, he was going to talk to Tony about, because of the gun laws, you have to have a lockable cupboard, and you have to have, so he was going to talk to Tony about building such a cupboard to lock up the ammunition and the guns in the office. But obviously it never reached that point. But it was interesting to hear from the outside perspective that they thought that it was going to be another Jonestown, but it was never going to be another Jonestown. There was never any talk of murder, suicide, mass suicide, drinking anything. There was no talk ever of that, or sacrificing yourself, like sacrificing yourself as in, giving up your will, but not sacrificing your life. There was never any of that talk.
So it was referred to as a doomsday cult because of that, or was
it was referred to as a doomsday cult because maybe because of that, I'm not sure, but it was also referred to as a doomsday cult because of the end of world theories that were always spinning around. And because Cam used to always, he would be writing to the media, he would write to he wrote to prime ministers, he wrote to any leader, religious or not, leaders of the, like the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, anybody that would listen, he would basically spurt out all this shit about how, the world was going to end and how you were going to be punished. Like, all three bishops of Wollongong, so there was Bishop Peter Ingham was there when I was there, so him, and then there was another one before him, I can't think of his name, and then there was Bishop Murray. So all of them, how many letters did Cam spurred out to them about, the Virgin Mary has told me that you're going to be punished, you are going against the rules of the Catholic Church, you are not recognising me as a new leader, you're not recognising me as the eventual last pope, you're not you're going to be punished, and chastisement's going to be heaped upon your head. Because he would just spurt all this out. Like, even when we had the Sydney 2000 Olympics, like, do you know how many theories that he was throwing around there, where the Virgin Mary apparently told him that there was going to be a major terrorist attacks, there was going to be thousands of people killed, that it was going to be the beginning of the World War III. And then in 2000, was it 9/11? When 9/11 happened, that was for sure the beginning of the Third World War. That was for sure going to happen.
Yes, it's amazing how when people do these prophecies, there's always a reason why they didn't happen, or we prayed hard enough and it didn't happen.
Oh yeah, exactly. And see, that's the thing. I held back, God's mighty hand. I've pleaded for you, ungrateful souls, and the Virgin Mary has listened to me. She's cried tears of blood to Jesus, and so he's held back his mighty hand. So we're going to hold them off for a bit longer, but you really need to stick to the rules. You really have to do as you're told. You all have to work as a cohesive group. You have to do more, say more prayers. You have to, give up your wills. There was that all the time.
Yeah, the rhetoric is that gets me is these stuff repeats over time again and again and again. And I think each time it happens, you lose a little bit of something, and
you lose yourself.
Yeah, but I often ponder the thoughts of what were we all like before any of this started? What were our psyches like before those little pieces are taken from us each time? It's
yeah. Well, see, again, that's my specialty, and because it took me 40 years to find Claire again, and I found the mischievous, sassy, adventurous, curious girl again, and that's who I am. that is who I am now. But Catholicism and, like being in an abusive marriage, and when I say abusive, it was not physically abusive, but all the other abuses, social, financial, spiritual, sexual, emotional, mental, psychological, all of those abuses. As you just said, it all, and then you've got Catholicism as well. It just picks it all away, and it picks away a little bit each time of your character and of your personality, and you lose yourself, and you're like, who am I anymore? Other than this puppet on a string, and full of guilt. And that's what, there came a time, it took a few years, don't get me wrong, it was hard work changing my thought patterns and delving in and asking myself why am I, why am I reacting this way? Why am I acting this way? Why do I keep having these guilt loops? For instance, I'm giving a talk tomorrow, today's Wednesday, isn't it? Tomorrow night, actually, in Sydney for Generation Women. And the theme is my biggest secret. And my biggest secret is my biggest sin, basically, because I struggled afterwards when I came out, after I came out of the cult, and it was a few years, it was probably, 2009, 3 years after, and I wanted to date. I was divorced and I wanted to date. And obviously part of dating is that, these days, I'm talking back 10 years ago, they have sex while they're dating. Mm. Now, that was a huge thing for me because that was like the biggest sin ever. That was the greatest sin of all sins, of, even desiring to have sex, for God's sake. And then, I went out with this guy who was not any religion, and that I wanted that. I wanted to just I didn't want to do the whole Catholic thing again. I thought, it's just, I wanted to be with someone who was of no religion. And, we went out for a few dates, and, he talked about having sex. He didn't, he understood my background, or part of it at least, so he wasn't pushing that. And he wanted to have sex. I wanted to as well, but the whole loop in my head was the 3 conditions of mortal sin, full knowledge, intent, and then going through with the act. God, just goes on and on. And I was, so I made the decision. It took me a few weeks to come to, that I would have sex with him. And then, but the thing was that I didn't enjoy any of that. It was almost like I don't remember any of it, because in front of my head and the loop going through my head, in front of my face and the loop going through my head was, this is full knowledge. This is full intent. I'm actually doing it. Oh my God. So if I don't like it, if I don't show any enjoyment and I tell myself I'm not going to enjoy it, is it still a sin? Could that actually be an excuse? No, probably not. And I just had this whole loop. And then this happened on a Wednesday night. And then, oh my God, Thursday, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so bad. My soul is black. Geez, I need to be careful when I'm driving that I don't have a crash, because if I have a crash and die, I'm going to go to hell forever. Oh my goodness, and who's going to look after my kids? And then I just was guilt, oh my God, how could I have done this? My kids, if something happens to me and then I go to hell even, who's going to look after my kids? My kids are going to be alone, and then I'm going to be punished forever. And then it just went through. And then finally, okay, I'm going to go to confession on Saturday. So, I show up to the church, and then, I'm kneeling there, and oh my God, now I'm trying to find a pin, I'm trying to find a loophole even at this 12th hour. And I'm like, should I, shouldn't I? Do you think I should I really? Oh, maybe I can just confess some other little sins that don't mean much. Well, oh no, sex is actually a mortal sin. I have to do this. And then I can hear my mum's voice in my head going, you've committed the greatest crime of all, is being a bad example to your children. How could you do that? You're going to hell. You're dragging them to hell. And then I'm thinking of my kids, and it's like, oh my God, what are they going to think? What are they going to think about their mother having sex and someone with not their dad? And then, oh my God, how could I have been so bad? And then I just thought, oh, hell. And then, all that, and then forever, you're in hell forever, you never get out. So that was the clincher. And then it was like, okay, so I go into confession, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 1 week since my last confession, and I mean, I've had a lifetime of practice at this. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, I had sex before marriage. And then, so phew, that's out. Phew, he can't see me because I'm behind the purple curtain. Phew, and then he has his words of counsel, whatever they are. I can't remember now. So I get my penance, whatever it is. And then you have to say the act of contrition. So I say the act of contrition. Again, I've had a lifetime of practice. Then I'm overwhelmed with guilt again because not only am I a hoe, well, not a hoe, but not only am I a hoe, I'm a liar because I'm not sorry. I don't feel an ounce of remorse. So here I am basically being a liar to God.
It's so funny as you're going through that.
My God.
I had this flashback to, I think I'm about 12 or 13 and I'm in confession and I'm arguing in confession with the priest because
how dare you?
Because he said, what do you want to confess? And I go, you know what? I've had a good week. I don't think I've done anything wrong. And he says, no.
Excuse me, that's the first sin of pride and arrogance.
Well, then he says, I can remember this. And he said, oh, well, did you? And he actually went through a list of things I possibly could have done. And I'm going, no, I don't think I did that. No, doesn't sound like me. And we get to the end of it and I said, so do I still have to come each week if I haven't done anything? And he says, yes, Sharon, go away. He actually knew who I was. It was quite funny because, but I must have, I don't know, like I never got the whole, why do I need to, and I used to say, my mum used to just say that, oh, but you can't take the bread of Christ until you've confessed. I said, but if you've done nothing wrong, why do I need to do any confession? Surely only really sinny people need to go into the box, and talk to the guy in the robe, in the dress. I remember saying that to my mum, and I remember all the adults just laughing at it because, I mean, but yeah, I don't know, you're probably like me, every Saturday evening you go in and do your confession, and the next day you go to mass and you take the bread of Christ.
No, I was better than that. I went on the Sunday to be absolutely sure I was sin free. So there was no possibility I could, commit any sins overnight. So that was our family were known as like the best family. The McAuliffe kids were the best ones because they're always first to confession on a Sunday morning.
Wow.
So yeah. So and I mean, really, when you think about it, what arrogance, because I came out like even though I wasn't social or anything like that, I did think of myself because Mum had taught us that we're better than everybody else because we have the purity of the Catholic religion. So
being Catholic was a step above everybody else.
Yeah, we're better than everybody else. We were even better than the modern Catholics because they weren't even getting the fullness and the richness of the sacraments. So we were even better than they were.
My grandmother was hilarious. She used to say, we're even above the royal family because they're Protestants. They're Protestants. It was hilarious. My mum's family is half Irish, half English. So we had the Irish Catholicism in my family, and my dad was English, Yorkshire English, but his mother was Maltese because his dad had been stationed in Malta during the war, and he brought home a Maltese bride. So we had this intense Italian kind of. So I had that on one side. I had the Irish Catholicism on the other side. So you can imagine.
Had no hope. You had no hope.
And everyone had huge families around me. Like my dad was the eldest and he had 6 brothers and 2 sisters. And my mum's family, she was I think she had 4 brothers and a couple of sisters and 1 sister. And so when Mum and Dad just had my brother and I, they were, like as you were saying before, that was, why weren't you having more children? And my mum was a nurse too. In fact, my daughter started midwifery this year. So
wow, good for her.
Yeah, I actually just bought her online for her birthday. It's coming up. A stethoscope.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's quite exciting. So, but you were saying my whole family's the women have always been nurses, and I'm wondering now if it's a Catholic thing. You go into that. Yeah.
Well, good question. That is a good question that I don't have the answer to. Who knows?
It's
you
more.
know, is it the service?
Yeah, because you're. Although my daughters have gone to Lutheran, and they've had that, but we've not been. I haven't enforced any Sunday doctrines. I didn't even do Sunday school with my kids. But I know I have been a very bad Catholic.
You're definitely, there's a special place in hell for you.
They were baptized though, Anglican, and because I didn't want them going to limbo. For those out there that aren't Catholic, limbo is this awful place that unbaptized children and adults go to.
And
they can never get to heaven. But then they can never get to hell either. So I always thought, well, that's kind of half, quite good then, isn't it?
It's half decent. Yeah, well, see, I'm a bit ambiguous about this limbo thing because because when I did ask for details from Mum, it was like, well, they're happy, but they don't have the full happiness of seeing God. I'm like, oh, okay. So
the hell. That's definitely a bonus. I mean, wouldn't you rather be? It's like I used to describe it as Middle Earth. If you're into Lord of the Rings, you're kind of in Middle Earth,
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah.
And that's everyone. That's where the elves are. Who doesn't want to be with the elves?
Yeah. Exactly. Why not? Oh God.
It's funny, isn't it? The stuff that you believe as a child, and then you carry through, and it was probably 19 was when I really started to question things and started to realize how ridiculous, and that's when I started to realize what words like programming meant. And I think that was early for me to actually, like, a lot of when I talk to friends about this stuff, they all say it didn't hit them till mid-30s. And wow. I think I had it hit me a lot earlier than most. I mean, I think I was more, I don't know, maybe I've been reincarnated, so I went through a lot of stuff last time, so I woke up a bit earlier this time.
Go you.
William Cam did claim that he received messages from the Virgin Mary herself on the 14th of every month, from what we were discussing earlier.
That's right. Yeah.
Was there any special ritual he used to do to get the message, or was it just kneeling or?
Well, we had to say the rosary because you should know about the rosary. Okay. So we would have to say the rosary, and then we would probably get to the beginning of the third decade, and then there'd be a hush fall upon the group because the priest would basically turn around and sort of go, to stop everybody from saying the rosary, and then somebody would hold a microphone to his mouth, and then he'd be going, I see the Virgin Mary. She's coming down on a cloud. Jesus, I could probably do this myself.
And better.
And then it'd be like, she's come as Our Lady of whatever. Could be anything, Might be like, what's the Feast of the Miraculous Medal? I think that's in September. So in September it might be, she's come as Our Lady of Miraculous Medal. I can see the creamy white robe underneath and the beautiful blue cape. She has stars around her head. And, and then he'd be going, it's got like 13 stars, and the reason why there's 13. See, this is another thing. On those miraculous medals, my mum used to get them, and she'd be there counting the stars. If they had 12 stars on it, it was okay. If it had 13 stars, that meant that it was actually the Antichrist was starting to create miraculous medals with 13 stars. So, because obviously we would be such good Catholics that we if we didn't know, we would just wear them, and then that was his way of actually getting into us.
Yeah.
What kind of bullshit is that? But anyway, he would say. Oh, God. But then that's what he would say, and then he'd go into great descriptions about what she was wearing and which saints were with her or which angels and the names of the angels, and all angels have names, and they're all, I don't even know how he kept up with all the names of them. And then there would just be and then there'd be like, greetings, my little pebble, my little ark, and then he'd go on to mention certain ones, and then there would be some waffly message, and then at the end there would be like I give special blessings out. There will be special blessings given out to a couple of different people. Now, one of the first, yeah, well, I did get one. I actually wasn't there for that particular message that day. It was when we first moved there, I think, and I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be here, so I never wanted to live here, so I'll just be on the peripheral and just sort of, not take part wherever I don't have to. And so for that particular one, I wasn't there, and there was some special blessing given to Claire, and that I was now a princess. And so Tony was there, and then he followed William Cam out and said, oh, that Claire that was mentioned, was that my wife? And he said yes. But then I found out beforehand, because there were some other eager ones that have been chosen already, already part of the royal house of David, and they came bolting over and they're like, oh, my God, you've been chosen as a princess. And I go, yeah, sure, yeah, whatever. And they go, no, you really have. You've been chosen by Our Lady to be a princess. I'm like, sure. And they said, oh, you need to write to William to find out, write to the little the Virgin Mary through William Cam to find out your name. And I go, I already know my name. It's Xena Warrior Princess, because I thought that was a series on TV at the time, and I thought, if I just go along, make a joke out of it. And they said, no, that's not your name. You're just making that up. So you don't really know your name, and so you've got to find out what your name is. And I thought that if I didn't write the letter and I didn't find out, well, then I wouldn't have to commit. Yeah. And I didn't want it anyway, because for me, I'm a very practical girl. I don't want to be swanning around in robes and a tiara. It's not me. It's absolutely not me. And but anyway, one of them did. One of them decided that they'd write anyway and find out. And so they did, and then they came and told me. And for the life of me, I cannot remember what my name was. And I was given a special flower. Because all of them are given a special flower, so I can't remember what my flower was. However, I was given. Hey,
you know your name. I don't think you really were a very good princess, I'm afraid to say. You don't know your flower, don't know your name.
No, but see, the worst thing was I was given a saint. Do you know which saint was supposed to be my saint to help me in my princess role?
Oh, no.
Mary Magdalene.
Oh, the prostitute.
Yeah, the whole. And I mean, I can laugh. I can laugh at it. Yeah.
They're actually saying she was married to Jesus. Did you hear this?
Oh, yes, I have heard that. Yeah. Yeah, so I was actually a hoe, and I was given a, like Saint Mary Magdalene. I was given her as my saint. But see, for me, I had I never wanted to be chosen. B, I was chosen against my will, and C, I had no understanding of what the hell it was I was supposed to be doing. So eventually, when Tony asked, the answer was given that it was for the new holy era, when I would help spawn a new race through William Cam, and it was just going to be a hug. So it would just be like a hug, and then the special seed would implant in my womb at the right time. Yeah, right. So anyway, later on what I found out to be was basically the prettiest girls, like the queens, were young virgin teenagers, like very attractive ones that he basically wanted to have sex with. Pardon me. So they were queens, and then the princesses were married women who, like, they were married to their husbands, and then they would have children in the new holy era. But then he expanded it, because he had the queens as being the virgin teenagers. Then there were some that wanted to be. There were some that he conceded, some married women that he conceded could be, or the Virgin Mary chose, to be minor queens. So then it became major queens, minor queens, and then it became princess queens, and then princesses, and then baronesses. So he just expanded it as it came.
And that's the Royal House of David then, is it?
That was the Royal House of David. And the way he got away with it was that King David had all these concubines in the Bible, and that was allowed, and all the rest of it. So he was allowed, because the earth was going to be destroyed, he was allowed to have these these women to repopulate the earth with.
Mm. So Little Pebble only served 7 years of that, but he was given a 15-year sentence. Was that just for the one crime?
I think that was for the two.
The two crimes. And were the two that he abused sexually, were they queens?
Yeah, they were.
They were. How angry are you that he didn't get a full sentence? He didn't serve his full sentence. I mean, I that's one of my pet hates in Australia. These predators never seem to serve their full sentences.
Well, for me, look, yes, I can be angry. Look, firstly, I'm very surprised that he actually made it out alive, because generally they don't. You can be angry, but the thing is that what does that anger do? That anger doesn't help. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help anybody else. For me, I have turned it into talking about it and highlighting what it was really like, highlighting what it's like to actually live in a group like that, so that it helps other women come forward, or other women to recognise these groups, other women to recognise these predators. And if they're already in that, maybe something that I say will help them see and understand where they are, and maybe they can get out. Yeah. That's my thing, because I could sit there and be angry and be resentful, and I could be the same for my ex-husband, but what good does that do? It doesn't do anybody any good, and you end up just bitter and twisted, and there's no point in that. I wanted to put what I learned, I wanted to harness my power and my and like being an inspiration to other people, harness that and put it to good use, because there's no point in just being bitter and twisted. I mean, I've been contacted by women around the world who have like they've said to me, they're so grateful that I have spoken out. And some of them have said that they've been broken by their experience, and they just want to stay in their little hidey hole and not ever tell anybody that they were part of a cult or a restrictive group, or they were abused in any way. They don't want to do that. And you know what? I feel sad that they're broken. Yeah. So for me, if I've been given that strength and resilience, I want to put it to good use. And for me, when I wrote my story, it wasn't just about, oh, look at me, this is my story, let's get it out there. My book provides valuable information and insight into what happens in these groups, like whether it be a new religious movement, a sect, a cult. It helps people to understand what it's like, not only for those that are in it and those who have come out of it, but also people like yourself and probably your listeners who may have never lived or known somebody like that. Because I found it so hard when I came out, because that group is on one side of Nowra, and then when we got evicted, I moved to the other side of Nowra, and the kids went to school there. And then when they went to school, like that church, that school community, it was a Christian school, and like they were wonderful. They were so welcoming. And I mean, to have someone say, "Oh, hi, how long have you been here?" Because Nowra is also a defence town, so you have a lot of defence coming and going. So I mean, it was, like, how long have you been here? Well, I mean, I could have been there for 2 weeks, I could have been there 2 months, I could have been there 2 years, and but for them to actually ask that question, and then I was tongue-tied. What do I say? Do I say that I've actually been in the area already for 10 years? Like, how do I say this? And then it became increasingly harder to try and describe where I'd been and where I'd come from. And then I started giving little snippets here and there just to see how it would be received, because I was fully expecting to be totally cut off and people sort of going, no, and so, but then I was surprised. I was very surprised by how people reacted to me, how they were inclusive, how they were curious, how they asked a lot of questions. And then people said to me, "You should write a book." And I sort of went, "Yeah, I doubt it, It's not really a story. It's just something I've been through. But then the more I talked about it, and then when I actually owned my story, there have been so many people who have just said, oh, my God, yes, I know someone who's in a group like that. I know someone who's come out of it. I know this person who has struggled. And, you know, like in me being able to speak out, I've actually helped people. I am helping people. And when I mentor women, this is what I help them through. And it makes me feel so good to be able to do that, you know, to see their faces light up and give them a new lease on life. That is the best thing, I'm telling you.
Now, you quoted some figures. Let me just find them here. In your TEDx video, you stated that 70% of people inside a cult are women. And I've got to say, that shocked me straight off. And you then went on to state that in Australia, there were approximately, in 2017, 3,000 cults. What do you believe to be the underlying personality traits of women that allow themselves, and men, not just women, I suppose. I'm just saying women there because 70% is a large amount. What is it? What personality traits, like, you know, in your case, it's completely different. You were indoctrinated from birth, basically. So you grew up in that. So you've never known anything different. But there are a lot of people that go willingly into cults around the world. And obviously, if there's 3,000 cults in Australia, there's a lot of willing people setting these things up. And why would people want to be submissive, not only to men, but just to a community in environments like that? What is it about their personality that would make them want to do that? I mentally just can't imagine ever wanting to do something like this. You mentioned a little bit earlier about the community, the communal, like your ex-husband wanted that kind of, what do they used to call it? Feudal. He wanted a feudal kind of setup, didn't he? He wanted to go back to feudal times.
Well, the thing is, I think that for women, like, I mean, we've always been the givers, you know, the ones that look after people. We've been, you know, the mothers. We look after the children. You know, we bear the children. We look after the children. We've taken a back seat, and I think that just women's mindsets and also the way they've been brought up, it plays a big part in that, in women feeling submissive. You know, I mean, there can be all sorts of reasons. There can be reasons, you know, like financial reasons. Like, I mean, I definitely didn't want to go to the little pebble cult, but we didn't. My ex-husband and I didn't share a bank account, so I had no money. I had nothing. I had no resources whatsoever. So I was forced into it. And see, for some women, it can be financial. Some women, it can be social. Some women, it can be, you know, they don't want to be a single mum. Yeah. For some women, they just don't know any different. Maybe they go in blindly. And then when you're in there, like, I mean, I saw with the little pebble, you know, like how he promised these women things, you know, like he was promising, like the Royal House of David, we were all promised, like, you know, like we were literally going to live in the castles in like Switzerland, Liechtenstein, or however you pronounce it. Like he showed us pictures of these castles in Germany and Austria and all around there that we were literally going to live in. We were going to have servants. We were going to have gorgeous flowing dresses. We were going to wear tiaras. We're going to have luscious hair, beautiful looks. We're not going to lift a finger. We're going to, you know, we would have been through the chastisements and we would have just had the perfect bodies, the perfect everything. You know what I mean? Like this, and see, those women that have little or no self-esteem or little or no self-confidence, you know, little or no education, they go for this because it gives them something to live for.
Yes.
Rather than, you know, like, I mean, I just remember, you know, like for me personally, I never envisioned myself living in a castle and having a tiara and floating around. Because to me, there's nothing more boring. There's nothing more boring in the world for me to be doing that. I'm telling you right now, that's the most boring thing on the planet for me. I have to be doing something. I have to be helping somebody. I have to be doing something. I cannot just do that. But I mean, some of those girls just loved it. Oh, you know, my spiritual name is blah, blah. Oh, you know, the little pebble has shown me the castle I'm going to live in. I'm thinking, really? Really? Oh, you know, I've asked the Virgin Mary what kind of tiara I'm going to have. Seriously?
Yeah.
Like, some of them lived for this.
Well, it really does come down to not just gullibility, but it is your personality. You're either naive and you don't want that responsibility of steering your own life. So you were just so not a match for any of this from the sound.
No,
I mean,
I wasn't.
Wow. So in a way, it's kind of good because you grew, like between your parents and the tutor that groomed you, they underestimated you and you proved them all wrong.
I know.
Great.
I love it.
Yeah. They picked the wrong, they made the wrong choice.
They did.
At any time when you were in St. Charbel, were you concerned that William your oldest, say, girl child, how old was she when you were still in the cult?
When we left, they were 16, 15, 14. So I had a son, 16, a daughter, 15, and another son, 14. And then they went down from there. In January 2000, I figured out what was going on. And because I'd wondered why there were a few single girls that had these mystical babies and they were still virgins. Because I'm thinking, yeah, that don't work. And one of them had a cesarean section. She's claiming she was still a virgin. I'm like, yeah, right, okay, whatever. Anyhow, and I had already been told to keep quiet because I asked too many questions. Because, I mean, when this 17-year-old moved over from Canada and she was pregnant, I'm like, of course I go, so who's the father? And everybody goes, shh, you don't ask that question. You don't ask that. That's a mystical baby. Shh. I'm like, oh, okay then, righto. Keep your mouth shut, Claire. Bite your tongue. So then I just started looking and watching, and I noticed that he would spend time, like, I didn't see him that often, but there were times when I would see him with his arm around a teenage girl walking down to the chapel. He kissed a lot of married and single girls on the lips. Apparently it's German custom. And it was definitely didn't do me, that's for sure. And there seemed to be a lot of jostling at the back, you know, because he had this special bishop's chair at the back. And there was a lot of jostling whenever he came to the chapel, like who would be kneeling right next to his bishop's seat and in front of him and all that sort of thing. So, and then, like, I just used to watch the different ones and who he seemed to be hanging around with and all that. And then, you know, over time, you know, there's a few that got pregnant. And then in January 2000, there was one of the queens, i.e. gorgeous teenage girl, I think she only just turned 17, had a particularly hard birth, giving birth to one of, well, his children. But the way he wrote it up on the board, it sounded more like someone that you would be married to. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember what he wrote, but it just, wow, it just literally... it just hit me, and I thought, wow, he is, like, this is what he's doing. And I was disgusted. I was horrified. I was angry. And I just went home to my husband and I just said to him, I don't want to be here anymore. He is disgusting. He's having sex with these girls and he's making them pregnant, and it's just wrong.
I noticed in a lot of other interviews, people ask you how you escaped from the order, but I just think somebody was actually above, was looking after you, because what happened was you seemed to tick Cam off enough to stop paying your mortgage, and then the sheriff kind of set you free from that person. So as much as I think a lot of other journos have been trying to get you to say you escaped, I don't think you technically escaped. You had a couple of lucky breaks, really, didn't you? Which is good.
Well, the thing was that I was looking for opportunities. I was open, despite me not having any choices or resources whatsoever. I was just on the lookout, and I was going to accept anything that was going to get me out of there. So, yeah, you're right. I do believe that God, the universe, was looking after me, and I was just smart enough to take those responsibilities. Take those opportunities and just go for it. And that's what I did. And despite me having no idea how to live in the real world, I just went for it, and that was it. That's what I had to do. And I had to do it for my kids. Well, it was scary.
The stockpiling of food, water, and other essentials seems to have been a key in both the sect and the cult that you were in. What reasons? I mean, I think I know from the second, not from the sect, but from the second one. Obviously, there was a lot of warnings from the Virgin Mary, obviously, which kind of were why you did this activity and you stockpiled things. What did the sect say? Because if they were still closely aligned with the Catholic Church, I can't imagine the policy.
Yeah, but there was still that undercurrent of there were certain factions within the group that were believing about the end of the world coming. So even though when the society first came to Hampton, they did say from the pulpit there was to be no more circulation of any messages from the Virgin Mary that weren't condoned by the Catholic Church, because there was people doing that before, and they were just spreading messages left, right and centre from wherever the Virgin Mary was supposedly appearing. So there was that. So they put a stop to it, but even though they put a stop to it from the pulpit, there were still people doing it. So, you know, people still believed in the end of the world coming, because the year 2000 was a clincher. That was supposed to all happen then.
Yes, I was in IT at the time, so we made an absolute killing in IT the 5 years leading up to 2000. So I take it that you are no longer a religious person, or perhaps just not Catholic.
I don't consider myself religious. I consider myself spiritual. So I still do believe in God, but not the strict God that I was brought up with. And I have no issue with people going to church or anything like that. And like I mentioned to you before, I want to actually go into religious studies because I find it fascinating. So I don't want to practice. I don't want to have that control and that rigidity of having to go to church and live by laws and all the rest of it. I want to be able to study it, but from stepping back and looking in.
It's more as an academic.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you were finally out in the real world, just you and the kids, what was the first luxury you treated yourself to and each of the kids?
Well, I was then in charge of the money, so we treated ourselves. I can't remember specifically because it was a treat just to be out in the world. The biggest, I suppose you could say, the biggest treat was the house that we got was a double-story ex-display home, so nobody had lived in it. So it was brand new. It had a gas stovetop, an electric oven. It had a dishwasher, and that might seem so trivial to people, but to me it was heaven. And it had 2 bathrooms. Up until that point, we'd had 1 bathroom and 1 toilet that the whole my ex-husband said that we had to have baths because it saved water. So we were actually sharing bath water. As gross as it sounds, that's how we had to live. So for me, like, firstly, the house was new. Mm-hmm. It was painted like in a beautiful cream color inside and out. And it had so many windows. It was light. It was airy. It was roomy. It had the 2 bathrooms. It had the 3 toilets. Like, even like my youngest was 2 when we moved out, and I can ask him today, and he will still remember like that house. He still remembers it, and he just goes, "Oh my God, that's my favorite house." And I think for them, they all have those beautiful memories of coming out of the cult and moving to that house where it was just like, you know. So I would say that would be the luxury, I guess.
So what are each of your children doing now? I'm just fascinated to know what they went on to do, because obviously they went integrated into the school system. Did any of them go on to uni?
I've actually had my first one go to university just this year. So she finished school last year, and she entered into like commercial interior design. So she started that this year. Mm-hmm. I've got my 2 eldest sons. One's in the Air Force and one's in the Navy.
Oh,
and
lovely.
Then I have one daughter work for Department of Veteran Affairs. I have another daughter work for Bunnings. Mm-hmm. And she's thinking of going to university. She's saving up to go to university. She wants to study ancient history and Egyptology. So that's her thing. Mm-hmm. I have two other daughters in hospitality. Well, 3 of them are in hospitality. Sue is in university as well. I've got 2 in high school. So one of my daughter in high school, she is thinking of doing something like a animal science or a vet science university, something along those lines. My youngest one, I'm not sure what he wants to do. However, his school, like the school has identified that he's like good at project management and leadership. So, you know,
business, Bachelor of Business.
Yes. Yeah. So there you go. That's what my kids are up to today.
And have any of them married, the older ones?
My eldest was married and he's now divorced, but he's got 2 little kids. So I'm a grandmother as well.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
So it sounds like they've all kind of come out relatively normal, which is great.
Yes. Well, I think I caught them in time in that, you know, those middle teenage years. And the school, I have to look, this Nowra Christian school was awesome. Like the principal, the teachers, the school community, they were absolutely awesome. They didn't judge me. They were very gentle and understanding and helpful. And all of my kids, they really helped the transition for my kids in such a lovely way. Mm-hmm. And it really helped them to be able to adjust much better and much quicker than what you would normally have expected.
Oh, that's brilliant. Just that makes me feel really good, actually.
Yeah.
Do you or the children have anything to do with their father? And is he still inside the Order of Saint Charbel?
No, he's not. No to both questions. He hasn't seen the kids for about 10 years through his choice. He chose not to. It was just all in the too hard basket for him to keep up with. So I just said, oh, whatever, you know, they're here and you can keep contact with them however you want, whether it's Skype, email, phone, whatever. I will facilitate that. But then it was like, oh, he's too tired and he's got a headache and he's too busy and all the excuses under the sun. So that's how it just went. He is not in the Order of Saint Charbel. Like, he had to move with the rest of us. However, he does still believe in conspiracy theories, end of world theories, and the like.
So what drove you to write the book? I think you mentioned earlier that you'd had it suggested to you by others. But usually, like, I'm an author, I've written 3 books, about to publish a 4th. And I know that to get me to the point of actually putting pen to paper, there has to have been kind of like an epiphany or something for me. Did you, or was it just a chance meeting with somebody that came out well?
No. People, like I said, as I was sharing my story, people would just say to me, oh, you should write a story and write it all down. And I just went, why? That's what I thought. I thought, really? I don't think so. But then as I began, and then it took me a couple of years, and then I thought, oh, okay, then I'll make a start with this. So I had no idea what I was doing. And I literally, so the book covers from 1970 when I was born to 2006 when I left the cult. I am having people say they want to hear the rest of the story, and so I need to start my next one because they're wanting to know, how did I become the person I am today? Mm-hmm. So I literally just did in chronological order 1970, 71, 72, like that, and then just put down bullet points for each one, and then just expanded what I could remember and all that with each one. And that's how I did it. I just did it all in chronological order. And then I met my author, and then that went on for a few years. Like, I dilly-dallied around for a while, so it took much longer than it should have, really. But then, I just thought, well, I can't, people kept asking me, when's the book ready? When's the book ready? And I thought, this is ridiculous. I need to just, so it was December 2017. I just thought, look, really, I need to get my shit together and I just need to do this. So I started getting up at 4:00 in the morning and just doing an hour and a half writing before I went to work. And then I met my author through a Facebook group that I'm a part of.
Your editor?
My editor, yes. And I knew that she edited books, and so I asked her, and, we get on like a house on fire. And she read it through. So I said, look, I would really like you to edit it. And she said, all right, swing it over to me and let me have a look. Because she said, I want to be able to do this justice. Just because you've chosen me doesn't mean I'm necessarily the right person for it. But she was really good. So she read it and she said, okay, I've got a suggestion. I think that we need to, if you're okay with it, move some things around so it's a back and forth. Mm-hmm. So it's not just reading in chronological order. And I said, look, if you think that's going to go well, you do it. And she did it. And everybody I've spoken to just goes, that is awesome. Like, going the back and forth, so I am really happy with it. And so many people have, have just come out of the woodwork, like a young man from the University of Edinburgh, he got hold of it somehow and he read it. And he wrote to me and just said, look, your story is amazing. You've helped me a lot because I've come out of something similar. And so his whole family's reading it. And I'm like, wow, I'm really making a difference here.
Yes,
I'm not selling thousands of books at this point, but the copies that have been sold are really, like one of the first messages I received was from a girl from New Zealand. She actually left the Society of St. Pius X a bit over a year ago. I don't know her, I don't even know of her, because usually I know quite a lot of the families or know of them around about, but I didn't know her. And I just received this random Facebook message one day and she's just going, hi, I'm so-and-so from New Zealand and I downloaded your ebook and I read it in one fell swoop and I identify with just about everything you're saying in there. And I'm like, wow.
Wow, yeah. That says it all, doesn't it?
So, and I just thought, wow, so that's amazing.
as you know, I also grew up Catholic, but decided to limit my offspring to two, mostly because I don't think I could have. I think God gives you what you can handle, and I had a series of miscarriages in between the kids, so I didn't even think I'd get a second one. So, but when it came to having a third, I just the thought just didn't. It was traumatic because I'd had a bad birth. Hopefully you didn't have 8 bad births. Hopefully you had 8 births. How on earth did you look after 8 children by yourself? And others in the community? Is that one of the benefits of actually being in communal living, that you can have that many kids? Or was
No,
on hand?
Well, in some communities maybe, but in that particular one, no, because we were all living living in our own separate living quarters. So you weren't, and they all had a lot of kids as well. So for me personally, no. Like, I mean, I had that many children because I was Catholic. Yeah. That's the reason why I had them. My youngest actually made it quite awkward for me a couple of weeks ago. He goes, "Were any of us planned?" Oh no, was I an accident? And I'm like, no. He said, "Well, who did you plan?" I said, "Well, actually, the Catholic Church doesn't practice contraception, so none of you were planned. So if you want to put it like that, you were all accidents. If that's how you want to put it." So the thing was that I did have that many because I was Catholic. How did I look after them? I literally I had to. My ex-husband wasn't a good dad. He didn't care. Basically, to him, women were just to have sex with and produce children, and that's all there was to it. He didn't have anything to do with the kids. He didn't help with them at all. And so I had to. Those children, the way I've seen it is that no child, they didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask to be born into those circumstances. And so it's up to us as the adults to get our shit together and give the kids the best life we can. And so I love each and every one of them. And I was determined that they would not go through, especially my daughters, they would not live the way I lived or be brought up the way I was brought up. And that's what has spurred me on to change, like to get out of the cult and to actually rebuild myself from reinvent myself from the ground up. And that's what I have done, because those kids deserve, and every child deserves, to have the best life you can give them.
Exactly.
And they deserve to be loved. So it's not just enough to just go, oh, well, motherhood isn't exactly what I envisioned. Well, maybe not, but you need to. Those kids can't grow up, shouldering your anger and your resentment because you didn't want to have them. And I mean, I have met some women like that, but I'm not that girl. Like, I love each and every one of my kids, and I will do anything for them, because I've had to be mother and father to them. And I will continue to be mother and father to them. And they know that they can call me anytime for anything, and I will be there.
This is a question I ask everybody I interview. If you had the opportunity to share an irrational truth with everybody in the world, and what I mean by irrational truth, it's something that is true but isn't construed out there as being a truth, what would it be? So from everything that you've been through in the sect and the cult, what is a truth that the mainstream wouldn't understand but is true? I suppose it's the ultimate truth of what you've learned.
The ultimate truth. There's a couple, I guess. The ultimate one would be that we are stronger. Well, first of all, we know our path. We do know our path, but we often ignore it just to follow what everybody else thinks is a good idea.
Yeah.
And the other one is that we are stronger than we know.
That's
and
true.
despite it looking extremely bleak and you're looking like you have no choices and no resources, there are things that you can do. And I mean, I tell my kids that I'm like God. I can create something out of nothing, and I can.